Today on the Shrewd Dudes podcast, who would have thought that an innocent little dinner could become such a mess? Well, apparently Trump just had a little innocent dinner and now the whole world is freaking out. We'll have to tell you about that. In American news, apparently one of Biden's handpicked trolls is not doing so well legally, and as much as we want not to take any pleasure in that, it's not something that's too surprising. Unfortunately, in the American Senate, they've done it. They've really done it, and things are going to get really bad for Americans. We're going to tell you about what the Senate has just done, and they've opened a Pandora's box of the purge on all their citizens. China is cracking down hard on all of its citizens, and funny enough, Canada is trying to basically worm itself out of any responsibility for their crackdowns. But are the two related? We'll have to cover that. So we're going to cover that and so much more today on the Shrewd Dudes podcast.
Alrighty, so we are back for another Tuesday and Newsday from a weekend of devastation and sin.
Yep.
Or it's just, a regular weekend.
Yeah. But Steven's always up to something crazy.
I am always up to something crazy. That being said, I'm going to try kind of on and off wearing my glasses. I just got these glasses actually today.
I told him he looked like Buddy Holly.
I didn't even know who that was.
Because of Weezer. I don't even I know Buddy Holly somewhat, but I was like, Weezer is kind of what made me think of it.
Yeah. Anyways, so
good though.
They do they're nice for a few reasons for doing the stream, primarily because they have the blue light lenses, so it's not draining and straining on my eyes to look at the screen for a long period of time. Mm-hmm. So I'll probably be wearing my glasses when I'm inside and then wearing my contacts when I'm out about doing stuff. So, just to make things simple. Mm-hmm. Anyways, so before we get into the crazy stories that happened this weekend, on Thursday we were saying oh man, it's a really slow news week. What are we going to even talk about? And then this week it's just bam, 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 bam.
One after the other.
I know. It's just and these are not okay, these are stories, but there won't be that much to talk about them in commentary. It's no. They will be talked about
for a while.
It's
going to be big.
Anyway, so Danny, how was your weekend? And then we can jump right into all of this crap.
I was very sick.
Yes, you were.
I had a second bout. I've never had. I've had the flu in the past. I've never had the flu where it hits you one weekend, goes into this
a lull,
a milder, cold kind of thing, and then it comes back again in the next week. It was crazy. Saturday, Sunday evening, I literally came home and I just collapsed. I was like, dang, I was done. And it's not until today I finally felt somewhat okay. You can still kind of hear it in my voice.
Yes.
But being sick sucks, man.
Indeed.
I'm just glad. I'm glad I finally got through most of the worst of it.
I was getting emails from people. Nobody in Calgary wanted to come to our viewing of the procedure, but people around, they're like, how'd it go? And I'm like, it didn't. And they're like, oh? And I'm like, well, it was only Danny and I that were pledging to go. Mm-hmm. And then Danny got really sick. And I wasn't going to go downtown with something that is as risky and out there as the procedure. And we're very we'll get there, but I'm not going to do it by myself. So I'm like, that's just asking for my stuff to get vandalized and stolen.
Yeah, pretty much.
So I'm like, we're going to hold off. We're going to try and hopefully see if there's some nicer weather in the next couple weeks. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to play it by ear as far as that goes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we will see and hoping for the best. That being said, of hoping for the best, actually, we can't hope for the best out of this crap. Everything is garbage.
You gotta hope for the best, man.
Always. Everything is garbage. Let's talk about it.
There's the optimistic guy I know.
Kanye West abruptly leaves Tim Pool podcast while discussing anti-Semitism charges. Ye or whatever, formerly known as Kanye West, brought a white nationalist to his Mar-a-Lago meeting with Trump. Yeah, that was real smart. Mm-hmm. So the artist formerly known as Kanye West went viral on Monday after he stormed out of an interview while being confronted about his anti-Semitism. The embattled music superstar has been under fire over the past several weeks for his rhetoric towards Jewish people, particularly his tweet declaring he was going on DEFCON 3 on the religious group. Ye resurfaced in the news last week when he brought known anti-Semite and white nationalist Nick Fuentes to a meeting at Mar-a-Lago with former President Trump, who has been facing intense backlash for dining with two such controversial figures, especially since he announced his 2024 candidacy. On Monday, Ye, joined by Fuentes and right-wing provocateur turned Ye 2024 campaign manager Milo Yiannopoulos, appeared on Timcast, where host Tim Pool touched on past comments and his meeting with Trump. Mm-hmm. All right. There's a video of it.
Oh, there is?
Yeah, there's a video at the bottom here.
Of him, like, actually leaving?
Yep.
Been extremely unfair to you, I think.
Who is they, though? We can't say they is, can we?
Press. I'm not using I don't use the word as the way I guess you guys use. I'm talking about.
It is them, though, isn't it? I mean, because because when you think about it, consider it. In 2018.
What do you mean it's not?
What do I mean? Like, okay, so how about? Are you leaving?
Are you referring to the press?
He's gone. I'll say it right now. You guys want to bring that stuff up? And then think we're not going to have a conversation?
Like, have the discussion.
Like you think he's going to come in here and say, here's my pain, here's my suffering. I'm going to say, I hear you. And then he's going to say, and it was Jewish people. And I'm going to be like, okay, but don't you consider, so I'm not going to do this. I refuse.
Yep. I saw that. I saw that live when it was actually up.
Yeah.
I saw it on my YouTube, and I was like, oh, this is good. This is crazy. Like, I saw the Milo Yiannopoulos interview when he had Milo Yiannopoulos on the show. And I was like, wow, this like, I forgot how well spoken Milo was. And for good reason. Now it's one of his, like, most like highly watched, like, episodes of IRL. So no shock that when Milo arranged for, like, for Yi and for, like, this other guy to show up, like, that would be a big deal, right? But, like, when I saw that little storm off, I don't know. Did you watch the whole thing when it was happening, Stephen?
I've watched segments from it, and then I watched, of course, Timcast this morning when he was kind of going over everything that happened.
Yeah.
So I have enough of backstory and the more than just a gist of what happened.
Yeah. So I definitely, like, so I saw the actual, like, right from the beginning, right until he stormed out, like, even afterwards when some other people came and took their spots and all that. But I remember watching, and I'm like, okay, so he basically started off, and he immediately decided, okay, we're gonna talk about this, and we're gonna talk about this, and we're gonna talk about this.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, fine, that's cool. Like he I mean, Tim Pool had, like, a plan, an actual show plan that he wanted, but, like, he's like, okay, well, I'll go with whatever way you want to go, right? And it was weird because initially I was watching, like, Yi was talking about all these things and all these kind of, like, talking about himself and all these things that he was going through. But the one thing I noticed is that he was just monopolizing the time. And actually, when somebody else intervened, like Luke did intervene with just more like a question, like Yi was like, like, well, like, you cut me off. He's like, oh, sorry about that. Like, continues. Like, okay, cool. And then he just kind of kept talking. And I was like, okay, I get that he's kind of a big deal guest, but at the same time, basically wanted to dominate.
Well,
wanted nobody else to talk.
Now, Tim Pool actually described why he thought that happened. And he said that because Kanye and Milo have been closely related, Kanye essentially assumed that the episode with Milo would be like a guidepost for how the episode was going to go. And in the episode that which Milo was on, Tim essentially just let him talk because Milo, of course, had been deplatformed and censored across the internet. And so he's like, all right, well, we're just going to have you on and you can talk because you haven't really been allowed to in the mainstream platform.
Yeah.
Whereas, of course, Kanye's had interviews upon interviews upon interviews with people.
Yeah.
And so there's no issue of deplatforming him, or at least there wasn't. And so he can still find an audience. And most people know his views. And so it's like, well, we want to talk about the big news, and the big news was this dinner.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna break. Let's talk about the dinner. Let's talk about the two stories related to that, and then we can break it down because I actually have a very bit of a strange take.
Okay.
So
you go ahead. I'm gonna get something to drink really quick.
Oh, really? You're just gonna leave midstream? He's abandoning me.
Oh, keep going, you baby. Yeah, big baby. Don't be like Kanye.
Oh. Well, you're the one storming off. Oh. Trump calls Kanye West seriously troubled man in rant about Mar-a-Lago meeting. Donald Trump called rapper Kanye West a seriously troubled man who just happens to be black after the ex-president was roasted for a meeting this week with the embattled hip-hop star and white nationalist. 76-year-old Trump dined with West and a white nationalist Nick Fuentes, both of whom are under fire for anti-Jewish remarks in his Mar-a-Lago resort. Trump has previously confirmed the meeting in a statement to the Post, but said Fuentes tagged along without the former president knowing who he was. Fuentes had said the math doesn't seem to add up on Jewish deaths in the Holocaust, and later denied he was a Holocaust denier. So Trump unleashed the rant on Truth Social on Saturday. I hope a seriously troubled man who just happens to be black, who'd been decimated in his business and virtually everything else, who had always been good to me and followed by allowing his request for a meeting at Mar-a-Lago alone so that I can give him very much needed advice. And West, who now goes by Ye, showed up with three people, two of whom Trump didn't know. He also said he told West, who's running for president in 2024, don't run for office, total waste of time, can't win, fake news went crazy.
Yeah.
So it's sort of interesting because, well, okay, I'm going to read the final point, and then we're going to go into this.
Sure, go for it.
So Donald Trump shied away from criticizing Nick Fuentes. Advisors wanted ex-presidents to distance himself from white supremacists with whom he dined, but Trump feared alienating supporters. So repeatedly refused to disavow the outspoken anti-Semites and white supremacists after they spoke over dinner. He was urged publicly and privately to denounce Fuentes, which included the performer Ye, who has also been propagating anti-Semitic remarks. But Trump eschewed making outright disavowals of Fuentes. The People said none of his statements from the campaign or his Truth Social account included criticism of Fuentes, despite efforts from advisors who reached Trump over the Thanksgiving holiday. He ultimately made clear that he fundamentally did not want to criticize Fuentes, a product of his dislike of confrontation and his anxiety that might antagonize a devoted part of his base, and became more entrenched in his obstinance the more he was urged to do so. Yeah, that was my reaction.
That's more like my throat.
Anyways, so all of this, like everything coming, like Kanye knew Trump, Milo also did know Trump as well.
Yeah.
So like Trump claiming that he didn't know Milo was one thing, and it's like, okay, well, he totally did. He was like part of his 2020 campaign, and he promoted him heavily in 2016. So totally nonsense that he's saying that he didn't know him. It's totally understandable he didn't know Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes is, well, best way to...
I've never heard of him before.
Oh, I've heard of him, but only because of there was a couple years ago, there was incidents where Matt Walsh and Michael Knowles, because I would watch these YouTube videos of them, of their Q&A periods. And so there was a period of time, I believe it was about 2018 or 2019, and Nick Fuentes supporters, which are called Groypers for some reason, not sure why, they would go to these events and they would ask questions, and they're like, if you claim to be like a Republican Christian conservative, then why don't you support Nick Fuentes? Why do you still support like it was basically some derogatory thing towards Ben Shapiro. And I was like, because Nick Fuentes is not a good individual. Like Nick Fuentes, for the basic, like he is a Holocaust denier. He has said openly that he supports bringing back segregation of the races.
Yep.
And that
it's not a big deal anymore, considering like the black community is doing that now.
Oh yeah, no. Well, he basically wants it to go back to the way segregation was in the '60s. He's like, yeah, society was better that way. And I'm like, oh, you're just lovely. And he blames a lot of American troubles on very similar to Kanye, where it's like, oh yes, like the Jews control everything, and the Zionist Jews are responsible for the destruction of America, and we should wipe them out. We should be supportive of the Muslims and their like attack against Israel.
Yeah, no, like, I can't get behind that.
Like,
part.
nope. Like, there's a reason that I publicly call you a turd.
Yeah,
because you are a turd.
This is the thing, though. The media has this like boy who cried wolf syndrome that I can't take anything that they say seriously.
Oh, I know.
They call everybody a racist. They call everybody a white nationalist. They call even people that are like complete like it's like I can't take anything that the media says seriously.
Yeah.
So when they said Nick Fuentes is like, oh, he's an anti-Semite, I'm like, I don't believe you.
Yeah.
I mean, I will look into it myself, and I will examine
do the research and examine what it is. I will do the
research to find out, like, okay, what did he say, and examine everything. But this is why I can't trust anything that the media says, because they're all a bunch of lying cheats.
That's true.
But this is the problem: is that
occasionally they're accurately describing somebody.
Now, here's the thing: the problem is that the left has this tactic in their playbook that they always use. It's the guilt by association, and association can be as tiny as saying hello or being in a picture with a person. I've seen people try to claim that Elon Musk is totally in bed with the WEF because somebody had a picture with Elon Musk and like somebody
at a party.
At a party, and I'm just like that.
Yep.
What does that prove, man? Like,
it was actually interesting. Like, because Michael Knowles, he was doing pictures at one of these events, and he took a picture with Nick Fuentes without knowing it. And then Nick Fuentes, like, well, like we took a picture together. Like, that means you support me. And he's like, I don't even know who you are, man. And then when I looked into you, like, you were a scumbag. And he's like, but you took a picture with me. Like, that means you support me. And it's like, that means absolutely nothing.
No, that
if I knew who you were, then I wouldn't have taken the picture.
Yeah.
Because you were clearly just trying to exploit this to promote your own gain.
These are the same people that tried to, like, suggest to, like, Jordan Peterson was like that he was associated with all these like nationalists or people because they bought his books.
Yep.
And he's like, are you serious? This is how insanely
guilty by insanely absurd association.
The standards that they use, like this is why it's so difficult to take anybody in this climate seriously, especially anybody on the left. I hate to say it. I used to don't like to make assumptions, but I mean, once is an accident, twice is like,
more than a coincidence.
More than a coincidence. 3 times and more is a pattern.
Is intentional.
At this point, everything, it's all intentional. They're liars, and it's so difficult for me to believe these people. Now, when it comes to Kanye, with Kanye, I was like, I liked him like in the when Trump was president and Kanye was meeting him. I was like, this is cool.
Yeah.
I mean, not that I was like, oh, Kanye's the savior of like the conservative movement, but more I was like, this is cool. Like,
Trump is kind of bring it back and
right. Now, however, I think that they're blowing his anti-Semitism comments out of the water. I can't honestly say that I've read everything he's possibly said on it. I think he has the right to have an opinion of any kind.
Yep.
If he believes that like some Jewish cabal, like I have roommates who believe this stuff, who believe that there's like a Jewish, like, bunch of Jewish families and groups on the very top who basically control everything. And I'm like, okay, fine, you can believe that.
Yeah.
Whether or not it's true is a totally other matter. But like the media, this is the media's favorite tactic, is they just name calling. That's all it is, and they're so careless about it that at this point, I wish there was a law that could actually charge people for flippantly throwing names because this is just getting so out of hand. Now, with Kanye West, I have serious doubts as to whether he's an actual anti-Semite. He can believe theories about who controls what and how much influence the Jewish, I don't know, oligarchs have on society. That's not being anti-Semitic. That's just believing something that may or may not be true. He doesn't hate Jewish people. That's clear as day. With Nick Fuentes, it sounds like he's much more problematic.
Yep.
And you know what? In honest, does that make me feel like any less about President Trump? No. I mean, probably as a public official, probably a good idea to do a little vetting about who's going in. And I mean, this is one of that unfortunate realities of being in a public office is that you have to watch for that.
Yep.
Now, the one that was really surprised by, and I will say I was really shocked when I heard this, is Milo.
Mm-hmm.
As long as I've heard Milo, way back when he was a provocateur before Trump was elected, and even when Trump was in office and all that kind of stuff, like I've only heard Milo say like how much he loves Trump and Trump is the greatest. Yeah. And even when he went on Tim Pool, he was talking about how
he was talking about the entire time.
He was talking about the whole time. And then Steven Crowder brought up some messages that Milo had said that he was planning to get the bench. Mm-hmm. I was like, what?
Yeah,
I did not know that.
He's torching the Republican Party.
Wow, I was so shocked when I found that out. I was like, dang it. Because I mean, if anybody had the ability to like orchestrate something like this,
it would be Milo.
Right?
So like that was actually my kind of out there idea, was that like the entire meeting between Trump and Nick Fuentes and Kanye, like Milo was a significant part of it. And he knew that because Kanye and Nick Fuentes, because they openly supported Trump and they were vocal about it, that Trump wouldn't deny them. Like if Trump had decent vetting and forethought about this event, as soon as Kanye made the DeathCon tweets, then it'd be like, okay, Firestorm is too great right now. Let's have a chat at another time. Like it's just sending a really bad message in a couple weeks after I announce my run for presidency. And one of the interesting things is that, of course, this entire walkout on Tim Pool's show, like Tim Pool was noticing this, everything happened as soon as Nick said, it was like one line, it was like, well, don't you think so? Like as soon as he said, it was like one phrase like that. And then as all of them, they weren't angry. They all calmly walked out. And I'm like, that's odd.
Well, no, Kanye walked out first. Then after a little while, Milo said, like, I'm going to go check on him. And then he walked to check on him.
Yeah.
And then Milo came back and got Nick Fuentes, and Nick Fuentes left too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But all three of, like, this was not, like, they weren't like, oh, like, I guess I could leave. It was like, all right, let's go. And it was very interesting because it seems as though Milo orchestrated this whole thing to link Kanye and Nick Fuentes with Trump as like known, well, Fuentes being a known anti-Semite and Kanye of making really problematic remarks about Jewish people. And then with them being associated with Trump, the Trump base is going to be a lot more skeptical. And then Trump's reaction in that he refuses to deny Nick Fuentes because Nick Fuentes has openly endorsed and supported Trump in the past.
Yeah.
And Trump is afraid of alienating Nick Fuentes' base.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're opposed to alienating Nick Fuentes' base? I'm like, the guy is, if anybody can accurately be described as like a actual, like, sort of neo-Nazi Christian white nationalist, or at least claiming to be Christian white nationalist, it's him.
Yeah, so I think like Chris Fuentes is probably the most
Nick.
Nick Fuentes is probably the most problematic of the three.
Oh yeah, by far.
But yeah, it's funny. Like I feel I've never liked this ever. This is one thing I hate about modern society, and I seriously think this needs to stop. This is just getting out of hand because this creates an absolutely hateful society.
Yes, it does.
When you're not even allowed to even have dinner with somebody that the public doesn't like.
Yeah.
The idea that you are not allowed to even host somebody that might be less than appealing to the public, without you being like destroyed by association. I hate that. I think that is one of the worst parts of our society entirely. And this is the kind of thing that justifies something like what happened that we're going to talk about later, like what happened in the early spring for us with the Freedom Convoy. This is how Justin Trudeau justified not meeting with the protesters. Oh, they're extremists. Oh, they're like these dangerous, terrorists and all that. This is how you justify othering people. And it's one of the worst features of our society. Yeah. And I think it really needs to stop. People need to stop feeding into this because this is just insane. And I refuse to even give any credence to the idea that Trump is in any way compromised or morally or spiritually compromised by meeting with these people. No. If he actually takes these people and their advisors or they're part of his team or anything like that, totally different story. But having dinner with them, I'm sorry. Yeah. Seriously, I'm sorry. That is not okay. So I refuse to give any credence to that.
I'm whether he had dinner with them is especially of course if what he's saying about how the dinner came about. Timing is not amazing. I probably would have delayed the dinner.
Sure. To
be okay, let's just kind of give a month or two until the media firestorm comes down, and then we can have a chat and try and plan these things out. I think the only thing about that dinner that I did not like was his outright refusal to condemn the kind of opinion of Fuentes.
Yeah, which I believe is probably more complex than maybe we realize. I don't know fully. I don't know why he refuses to condemn. Maybe he wants to look into this kid before he actually condemns him. Because let's face it, but at the time, he didn't even know who he was.
Yep.
Maybe he wants to look into this kid and find out what he's actually said. And once he looks into it, he's like, okay, maybe this kid is really out there, and I refuse to support him because he has denounced people like David Duke. He had no problem denouncing David Duke and other people like that. And I have a feeling that I don't know, just because I'm so skeptical of everyone in the media and how completely
dishonest.
How boy who cry wolf they are. I always assume they're lying before I believe they're telling the truth.
Yeah.
So everything that they're telling me about Nick Fuentes, I'm like, yeah, I won't believe it until I actually see it.
Yep. Oh, and trust but verify is usually a good method of going about things.
Yeah.
So, but it kind of made me harken back, all of this. It made me think back to Milo's comments about DeSantis. Because if Milo did everything as this way of getting back at Trump, getting back at the Republican Party, then it's okay, his entire persona over the past few months has been Trump is wonderful, Trump is great, everything is going Trump's way, and Trump is the future. I'm like, okay, and everything that he said about DeSantis is DeSantis is a rhino, DeSantis is terrible, DeSantis is a hack, and he's basically this charlatan of a Republican who has no charisma. I'm like, okay, is your intention that because you've basically said in the past that your entire purpose in life and that you will, if it's this mentality of if they go down, if I go down, I'm taking them with me. And it's Milo knows that the media and kind of the establishment press, they've already written him off. They're not going to consider him to be mainstream. He's not going to be invited on any shows. He's not going to have any role in that. He's always going to be part of the fringe.
Yeah.
Whereas Trump still has a very mainstream audience.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, okay, well, is his strategy to dismantle and take apart the entire Republican Party? Or is his strategy actually to distance himself from DeSantis and then somehow strangely promote DeSantis?
Well, who knows?
I'm like, it's kind of a kooky, crazy hypothesis. Well, I'm like, everything that you've been doing, like everything that you said in that interview, your actions since then have been essentially the opposite, because your actions since then have been essentially to destabilize and to self-destruct the Trump campaign.
Yeah. I think what happens is the lunatic left works like fire.
Mm-hmm.
If you feed it, it will grow and it will literally like spark out of control. And all it knows is how to destroy. That's all. Yeah. That's all they know how to do. The problem is that right now, and I hate that this is the world that we live in, because unfortunately it is. But Trump unfortunately played into their hands.
Yes, he
did. He had a good relationship with Kanye. He had I don't know, like maybe a cordial relationship. I'm not sure what his relationship was with Milo before this, but Milo, I know Milo got absolutely destroyed. There was a coordinate, and by the way, the media does this all the time. If you follow the media and then politics and the news as much as I do and Stephen does, you know what they did to Milo years ago. Yeah. There was a coordinated, all at the same time blitz where somebody released some, like, you know, damning like evidence or supposed evidence that Milo had somehow supported pedophilia.
Mm-hmm.
And it was totally bogus, but it was such an effective like smear campaign that they basically destroyed him off of like social media in one foul swoop. And so Milo's been wronged, very, very, very unfairly, and I actually feel for the guy. Kanye's been wronged in a terrible way, and I actually like after like Kanye. I think Tim Pool even said in talking about things after Kanye left. You probably didn't catch this, but he said that before this show, Kanye had asked him, like, you know, hey, he's like, hey, what do I have to do to be president? And Tim was thought that like, Tim thought that was like a joke.
Yeah.
And he's like,
and he was like harvest ballots.
Yeah. Like just, you know, like ballot harvesting or something like that. Just cause like, it was the first thing that came to mind. Right. But he's like, he doesn't know the first thing about like how to run for president. And yet Kanye is planning to run for president. He's like, yeah, that can't be right.
Yeah.
And so
this is the second time that he's claimed that he's going to do it.
Yes. But the problem is that Kanye, now that I got to see Kanye like in actual interview and all that, you realize that the guy he's in a lot of trouble. Yep. Like mentally, like the poor guy needs help. Yes. But he's got way too many sharks in the water waiting to pick him off. Like, I feel for the guy. Like, it's hard not to feel for him. Yeah. And I seriously feel, I think for him to get out of the limelight for a while, maybe find something, someone, some way of getting better, I think would be helpful. But having, I don't know.
A period of not, because like it's part of the it's kind of the kryptonite for both him and Trump, in that the attention for them is kind of self-harming.
Yeah.
It's like, well, the more attention that they get, the worse it is for them.
Well, and the problem is that see, this is the reason why I personally prefer Trump over DeSantis, because like everyone goes after Trump with such ferocity. I'm like, if they didn't believe he was a threat, they wouldn't go after him like that. They go after DeSantis, but they don't go after DeSantis with anywhere near the same amount of like absolute like raw hatred. Yeah. And all of everything that they throw, from like the Mar-a-Lago raid to all these like years-long investigations to attempts to throw him in prison. Like, it's just, you really know a system is in crisis by who they attack.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sad, like, to think that, like, if this actually works, it may, I don't know, maybe it'll hurt Trump overall. The system is incredibly sick, and I just don't know. Like, I think Trump's one of the few people that might be able to, like, dismantle it and actually maybe, like, like, kind of, like, change it for the better. But we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah,
we should probably move on.
We do. We've been on this for a while. It's a very interesting discussion. We wish we could spend more time on it, but there's a lot of other stuff to talk about today. Dang.
Oh yeah.
So, oh boy, The View Balenciaga played right into the hands of the far right by having kids in a sexualized manner.
Oh, lovely.
Alyssa Farah-Griffin and the other hosts of The View on Monday took up a discussion about the recent controversy that a Balenciaga ad campaign stirred up after young children were featured amongst fetish imagery. Another ad by Balenciaga's Adidas collaboration bag depicted the product on top of an office desk covered in documents. One page, mostly covered by the bag, contains the text of a Supreme Court case, United States v. Williams, a SCOTUS case concerning the distribution of child porn. Griffin stated, I found this ad campaign particularly distasteful in this moment. So there's this growing anti-LGBTQ plus sentiment.
Maybe you can play the actual video rather than reading it.
Oh, yes, there is.
What's going on here?
I found this ad campaign particularly distasteful in this moment. So there's growing anti-LGBTQ sentiment right now, and how it's being framed is as portraying, trans people as groomers. This is a term you'll hear on the far right. They're groomers. This is where you get the anti-drag queen stuff that we're seeing. So Balenciaga played right into their hands by having kids in a sexualized manner, carrying something that represents, sex acts. I think it was a really bad misstep at a moment where it's just kind of a dangerous time to even give credence to those kind of insane takes.
Yeah, I mean, we can't even show the picture because it's so distasteful. But what's also very distasteful is, like, Balenciaga lately, I mean, their stuff is just ugly. I mean, the bag that their little girls holding is ugly. Do you remember when Kim K was dressed in Balenciaga for the Met Gala? Look at that. Oh, she looked like a bat or something. I mean, so
it's really dumb.
That's how you distract from, like, horrible things like that. It's like, hey, look at this over here. Look at this over here. It's like, oh my god.
No, like, you look at that and it's like, okay, so, we talked about Balenciaga.
Course, none of them are going to denounce it.
No, none of them are going to denounce it. We talked about Balenciaga on Thursday because we're like, Hoagie Dinah, this is horrible.
It was horrible.
Just horrible. And the worst thing that they can say is like, oh, well, they're ugly. And like, they played right into the hands of the far right because they knew that they were going to take it about sexualizing kids. It's like, well, duh, because that's exactly what our culture is doing. They're sexualizing children.
Yep.
Like, there was this post. It was a meme from a friend of mine. And it was like, if you hit this button, it will every time you hit this button, a child will be banned from a drag show. And the guy's like, goes to hit it, and he's like, but you will also ban children from being entered in beauty pageants. And he's like, bip, 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 bip. It's like, we don't care. We take your offer. It is okay. Because both are sexualizing children. One to a lesser degree, but both are. And conservatives oppose all of it. They also oppose trans activists and trans teachers and LGBTQ teachers that are trying to enforce this stuff and trying to push this ideology to brainwash children.
Yeah. By the way, like, I don't know who the first lady was that was speaking, but she talked about, like, the so-called, like, the whole so-called myth that this is like that the trans people are groomers. I'm like, that is not a myth. That is not a myth. It is out in the open. Lives of TikTok has documented literally dozens and dozens and dozens of examples of trans teachers, people who claim to be non-binary or whatever, like literally indoctrinating their children on purpose, trying to turn them all gay or try to turn them into the rainbow kids, and actually encouraging them and like being like, hey, don't worry, I'll lie for you so you can be gay or you can be trans at school, but we'll never tell your parents. Like that's the most perfect example of grooming behavior. One of the big things is secrecy. If you're an actual groomer, like in the traditional sense, and you're like, I don't know, a babysitter, if you find out that your babysitter has been keeping secrets with your children, doesn't even matter what the secrets are. Oh, there's a whole bunch of secrets that we can't tell. Like, it's only between me and him. Like, do you think that would be suspicious in any way? Like that alone would be enough to be like, you're fired, buddy. You don't like have like secret things that my children only talk about with you. Like, don't give me a break. So these people are basically, and I will kind of like this but these people are nice sounding monsters.
Yep.
The fact that they're justifying and downplaying the actual hypersexualization of 5-year-olds. Like this is just this should be a like an easy layup. This should be a walk-off goal, like in an empty net. This should be nothing. They wouldn't. I don't think these people would even be condemned for saying, yeah, people shouldn't do that. This guy shouldn't have done that. That's wrong. I don't think they should do that. That would not be hard for them.
No.
And yet they can't even get themselves to do that.
No, they're like, the right opposes it. Therefore, we have to support it. And we can't say anything against it in a direct way. It's like, well, we can't oppose their campaign, aside from the fact that it's just making the right and conservative have an easier job about it. And it's like, why can't you just say that something is wrong instead of saying, well, as soon as, like, that's sort of, it's almost, not to be overly critical, Danny, but like, to support something because someone else is against it, it's like, okay, I get it, but it's also one of the weaker excuses for supporting something.
Sorry, what are you referring to?
Well, because of course they're reference to Balenciaga, but I'm also saying that your support for Trump is almost solely tied to how much that they're opposed to him.
No, actually, I didn't say that at all.
Well, that's what you were giving as your reasoning in the previous segment.
No. What I said in my previous segment, just for a quick recap, is that I don't give a crap how much they accuse him of guilt by association. Guilt by association alone is not enough for me to like withdraw support for Trump. If I withdraw support for Trump, it's because of something Trump does or says himself, not because of the people he has like dinner with. Okay. That's basically what I was saying.
Well, yeah.
And I think that's fair because you can't rely or trust the word of pathological liars. What? I don't know what you got to be more like obvious, man. Come on. I don't know what your hand signals.
Goalposts a little bit.
You know what? I'll go back and I will copy that. Like, and I will show you. Yeah. I think you're completely misquoting me. You know, and there's a video. Like
there will be video.
Yeah, there will be video. Like,
there will be video, and I'll be like,
I don't know. I think you're vastly like misrepresenting what I said actually. Anyways, but yeah. So like, I don't know, man. I don't know what to tell you. I think that the left. I don't trust anything that the left says. If I'm going to distrust Trump, it'll be for what he said, not for the people he met with. Okay. Yeah, like I don't know. Move on to the next story because we can't stand.
I know. Okay. So, from the New York Post, non-binary Biden official used stolen suitcase for a month after dumping women's clothes. Lovely. So, a Biden administration nuclear official accused of stealing a woman's suitcase from the Minneapolis airport allegedly emptied out the clothes and used the bag for a month despite insisting it was picked up by accident. Sam Brinson, one of the federal government's first gender non-binary officials, allegedly snatched the $2,325 Vera Bradley suitcase from the baggage claim on September 16th. When Brinson, who uses they/them pronouns, was confronted by police nearly a month later, they initially denied. Wow, New York Post. I hate how you use their pronouns. It's so dumb.
Yeah.
He initially denied stealing.
They
have to play the game, insisting the clothes were inside the suitcase at the time. But Brinton, the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Spent Fuel and Waste Disposition at the Department of Energy's Office of Nuclear Energy, quickly backtracked and claimed he had taken the luggage by mistake. Brinton told police they first realized the bag wasn't his, when he opened it at the hotel, according to the court filing. And this is Sam Brinton. Don't get mad, get elected. Okay. You weren't elected. And then this is two men pretending to be women. So that's just horrifying. So he got nervous that someone would think he stole it, so he emptied out the suitcase and dumped the woman's clothes in the drawers of the hotel rooms, the court documents say. Brinton allegedly put the ordeal down to exhaustion. When the police were first alerted, they reviewed surveillance footage that showed Brinton allegedly grabbing the luggage from the carousel and removing the ID tag identifying the owner. Brinton was later captured on surveillance using the same suitcase in at least 2 trips to Washington, D.C. on September 18th and October 9th, according to authorities. Yeah. If I had taken the wrong bag, I'm happy to return it, but I don't have any clothes for another individual. That was my clothes when I opened the bag. You are just a massive liar.
Such a, obviously caught.
Yeah. Obviously caught.
Red-handed.
Well, and of course, one of the interesting thing was, when I was listening, I forget who exactly I was listening to, but the excuse doesn't make sense that they took it by accident, because on that flight, Sam Brinton did not have any luggage. So there was no reason for him to be in the bagging area, aside from stealing someone's luggage.
Yeah.
And Sam Brinton, of course, is a known cross-dresser. So it's like, you probably took the luggage because you thought the bag looked nice, and because you probably wanted to try on the clothes because you are a sexual deviant.
Not to mention that he's probably thinking that, he works for the Biden administration.
And he'll be immune from any consequences.
And, they basically get away with bloody murder.
Yep.
So, yeah, not shocked at all that, this is the kind of thing where, there's celebrities who get caught for shoplifting. Even though they're, super mega rich, but they still shoplift because they like the thrill or something like that. This is what it strikes me like for this guy. Where they're just convinced that, nothing I do will ever come back to me. So, it's not a humongous shock to see somebody like this, because in order to be particularly a high-end transgender individual, you have to have a lot of hubris. Yep. In order to be in those positions, you have to have an awful lot of entitlement and feelings of I am the top of the world and all that kind of stuff, and everyone's giving you all the accolades, so you basically fall into that trap. So not shocked that this guy went that way. But a little bit of signs of the Biden administration's crumbling moral ethos.
Yes, indeed, which we already knew was well and underway. And it's only been getting worse.
Yeah.
So, just a sign of the times. Crazy non-binary people stealing people's luggage because they're deviants. And hopefully that he will actually face some punishment for this, but I really doubt it.
And we'll see.
We will see. Unfortunately, there's another company that won't face any consequences for something horrific they have done. And that is a company in Canada that has glamorized medical-assisted suicide. So, of course, this is an opinion column from Candace Owens. In recent years, I've been banging the drum to warn you guys to pay attention to assisted suicide. Fans write mean comments to me saying euthanize is not that bad. It's just for people who are really sick. Of course, that's become more evident that it's not just for people who are really sick. It's... They're saying, people, it's the right thing to do. Kill yourself. Just kill yourself because you're becoming a burden on society. At the same time, government leaders and leftists will make people mentally ill. How? By things such as confusing kids about their gender, telling them to take dangerous drugs, mutilate their bodies. And because of that, you have a bunch of depressed adults who will go to the government to kill themselves. That's what's going to happen. Of course, that's what's happening in Canada. Canadian fashion retailer Simons is full on sanitizing and promoting assisted suicide to sell clothes. The Quebec-based retailer made a deliberate move towards inspiration. Last month is a whole new video they're calling All Is Beauty. In a recently released video, the clip is narrated by a woman named Jennifer Hatch, who on October 23rd killed herself. She was suffering from an illness, and she showed medical assistance in dying, which is known as MAID in Canada. Canada's government funds this. So watch to see for yourself, and it's truly, truly horrific.
Dying in a hospital is not what's natural. That's not what's soft. In these kind of moments, you need softness.
Beautiful accent.
It can take dying to figure out what living is actually like. I spent my life filling my heart with beauty, with nature, with connection. So I choose to fill my final moments with the same. Last breaths are sacred. When I imagine my final days, I see music. I see the ocean. I see cheesecake. Even now, as I seek help to end my life, with all the pain, and in these final moments, there is still so much beauty. You just have to be brave enough to see it. And seeing the rhythms of what's gonna keep going after I'm gone bring a lot of comfort.
Yeah, by the way, that lovely lady there that was in that video, she's dead.
Yep. She killed herself.
No, murdered by her government.
Well, murdered by our government, but murder that she endorsed.
Let me put it this way, Stephen. If I request that the government kill me, and a government comes, like, I don't know, they send a police officer and they come and they shoot me in the head, how is that any different than what they're doing? I mean, other than the like, you know, like, oh, it's I mean, assuming that one shot in the head is enough to put me out completely. And, you know, like, how's that any different?
So, okay,
Really?
your scenario is that you called the police and asked them to shoot you.
No, I'm imagining a scenario where, or like a hypothetical, where the government basically says, like, you know, by the way, if you're done with living, call us. We will send a officer, a maid officer, and they'll come to your house and they'll put you out of your misery.
Mm-hmm.
All they're doing here is they're making this sound legitimate by basically sending a doctor to do it instead. Actually, not even a doctor, a nurse to do it for you, to poison you.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds more humane in that sense, but what it is, it's no different than how we treat dogs.
Yep.
Really, it's no different than how you treat dogs. You have, like, imagine if I have a dog, and imagine I'm a terrible dog owner, and I really don't care about. I don't really care about dogs' life. It's like, oh, I'm going to move to BC. You know what? I can't I can't move with a dog, and there's nowhere I can rent with a dog over there. I'm just gonna have to put him down. I can literally go down to the the vet, and I can have that vet put that dog down. Apparently, you can do the same thing with people nowadays. Yep. Except the people just have to request. Actually, people just have to request it, and the government.
It's more than just people requesting it now. The government is actually recommending it to many people. The other article, which we were talking about from the National Post, they actually said that it's now been uncovered that there were multiple veterans who called about seeking therapy and respite and counseling.
Yep.
About their PTSD, and the government's like, and the doctor and the government and the person who is referencing them to the sources they might need be like, well, we could get you some therapy, we could get you some counseling, we could get you some drugs, but have you considered medical assistance in dying? And it's like, what? No, I have not considered killing myself. That's why I'm reaching out to you for help.
No, don't worry, sir. We're not saying that you should kill yourself. We'll kill you.
We'll kill you. We'll take care of it to make it easy, and you can die in a way in which is painless, so to speak, and then you can die in your own way. You can have control over death. You can do your own thing.
Yeah,
that's part of why this is wrong. It's saying, well, I have control over death, and I'm squandering the gift of life, of course, that comes ultimately from God. So I'm spitting in the face of God by saying, well, I now have control over death. I choose when I can die, and there's nothing you can say about that. And I'm taking away this because my life's too difficult. Of course, we all know that suicide is the ultimate cop-out.
You can always feel for the people.
Oh yeah,
that commit suicide. They feel hopeless. They feel like there's no way out. But the problem with assisted, with basically assisted homicide, which is really what it is. The problem with this is that you are taking advantage of a person who is extremely vulnerable.
Yeah,
this is that. I'm actually concerned right now. Because there's suicide hotlines, right? Like in Canada, Bell always talks about suicide hotline and whatever. I'm actually genuinely concerned if the suicide hotline is now actually encouraging people to get
choose made.
I
wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised too much.
Imagine calling them, being like, "I'm having some really bad, dark thoughts." I'm like, "Oh, well, good news. You actually qualify for this. The
new
so
opening
we'll send
and the new exemptions of May.
to your house with a We'll send a doctor to your house with a loaded shotgun, and they'll blow your brains out. It's totally. Oh, I'm sorry. They'll come with a special medicine that a lethal injection that will literally kill you. But that's somehow better than coming with a shotgun. It's just not as gory.
Yeah,
to be honest,
less to clean up.
Yeah, less to clean up. That's basically the way to put it. They're disposing you like an old mattress.
Yep.
That's basically what they're doing. It's so
it's so messed up. And then of course, going back to this ad. This ad is basically saying, confrontation with death makes you realize what is truly beautiful about life. And I'm like, okay, there is something to say that if your life is close to being taken away, of course, we've all heard the phrase, your life flashing before your eyes.
Yeah, imminent death.
Imminent death. Everything that comes to the forefront is everything that's important to you and, the best and worst moments of your life.
Yep.
Because you're confronted with it. But the problem is, of course, is that this person it's well, now that I know that my life is going to end, I can live with reckless abandon. I can truly enjoy things in life because my suffering is coming to an end. And of course, they don't list what her suffering is. And considering the way that she was moving and the way that she was operating, it's well, you don't seem to be struggling that much.
Yeah.
You can move freely.
Yep.
You might be in a lot of pain. I don't know. But you don't seem to, you're certainly not having any debilitating illness.
Yep.
It's why are you trying to kill yourself?
Well, let's face it. What's really going on here is like the left always does this. Like Trudeau is such a far gone leftist. It's almost impossible to see him in any positive light. He is basically like signed his soul to the devil. He's a lost cause. I'm sorry. Yep. He is a horrible human being. But Trudeau made like aggressively pushed for MAID, not because it's compassionate. The left always tries to paint these as compassionate, but because it's cruel. Why? Because they refuse to spend money to fix the healthcare system.
Yes.
And people cannot get the help they need
because
when they're
it's
desperate.
Cheap.
And the cheapest and easiest way
is to
solve it is to kill them. Yep. This is murder.
Well, and of course,
well,
I've been saying this as being because they're like, oh, like people kill themselves in the States. And it's like, well, people kill themselves in the States, but the medical system does not encourage it.
Yeah.
Whereas the medical system here in Canada, like over the past couple years, has been pushing it more and more. And of course, now the legal system through the Canadian Parliament has authorized them to use it in almost any situation. Like there was a situation we were talking about a couple months ago, or not even a couple months, like maybe like 3 or 4 weeks ago, about a guy who is now dead.
Yep.
But they killed him because he was afraid of being homeless.
Yep.
And it's like, I don't want to die, but I'm afraid of being homeless. And it's like, okay, well, instead of trying to solve your problems and trying to like sort out and make your life better, we're just going to kill you.
Yep.
Because that's how the government views the people that they eventually, that get welfare and get social assistance. It's like, well, what's the best way we can help you? It's like, well, we could give you money, but we're going to tell you we're going to tell you over and over how useless, how dependent you are on the system, and how everybody but the government hates you, and you'd be better off and less of a drain on the system if you were dead.
And by the way, anybody who doesn't realize that this is a slippery slope towards like exactly the kind of eugenics they did in the Nazi regime is fooling yourself crazily. Yep. Because this will lead directly. If the government is authorized to kill anybody who requests, it's not a far leap for them to start deciding who gets to live and who gets to die. It is such a dangerous precedent.
Well, yeah, here, like I look at okay.
Hold on, I just got to throw this in here really quick. So these are the stats of medical assistance in dying in Canada since 2017. 2017, 2,838. 2018. 4,478. 2019, 5,425. 2020, 7,383. And 2021, it was more than 10,000.
Yep.
They are making this. This is like
they're making it into one of the leading causes of death.
This is now becoming like the most like egregious cause of death in Canada is our government killing people.
Yep.
Like, if I really wanted to take a big picture look down and be like, what are the crimes of this country? One of the biggest crimes, obviously, aside from abortion, is going to be the intentional, purposeful, and callous homicide of its own citizens who are at their most vulnerable point. Instead of offering help, they basically said, here's a gun. We'll just leave this right next to your.
Gonna leave you with a bullet, and like the place has a drain, so don't worry about the mess.
Yeah, like that is not compassionate. I don't see how
it's not.
Anybody can see that. So shame on this company for doing that. So
shame on this company. Shame on our government. Just another reason why the flag is upside down.
Oh, yeah.
Anyways, talking about shame, let's talk about the Senate passing the Respect for Marriage Act. And Republicans are split. So this is from the Daily Caller. Senate passed the Respect for Marriage Act on Tuesday, with 12 Republicans joining all 50 Democrats in supporting the legislation. Negotiated in the Senate by Maine Republican Susan Collins and Democrats Tammy Baldwin. We'll go back to the House of Representatives. There is likely to pass. The lower chamber approved the legislation in July, with 47 Republicans joining all 220 Democrats in support. If signed into law, the Respect for Marriage Act would affirm that states must recognize same-sex marriages performed in other states in accordance with the Constitution's full faith and credit clause. Yeah, the fact that there were 12 Republicans that signed onto this bill is abhorrent, especially without any sort of amendment to it. I believe it was Mike Lee who put forth an amendment,
tried
to make an amendment to it, where I believe his amendment essentially stated it was like, well, you also can't go after businesses, because this bill essentially stated that, well, you can be opposed to homosexual marriage in your church, but not in your place of business, not in any of these things. And it would open up the table for people to go after individuals like Jack Phillips, the cake shop maker in Colorado, or there was a florist in Pennsylvania and a wedding. There was a wedding venue in New York State, I believe. And so all these people will be fair game.
Basically, this becomes this legislation is basically nothing more than a hunting license.
Yeah,
you just make it. You
hunt
just
our
make
victims.
Open season. Open season on religious people.
And of course, like, it just opens the door. It's like, well, if it's already like, if we already have legislation to do it in the workplace, then it's just a small hop, skip, and a jump to do it against the churches.
Yeah,
like if this, like this, of course, will pass, but there will be amendments in the future, and the amendments are going to be further restrictions and further legislation that will make it almost identical to the conversion therapy law that, of course, passed in Canada, which is an embarrassment and a stain upon our nation. Canada is a joke. And like several people were mad at me, but people were like, "Oh no, like Canada's out of the World Cup," and I'm like, "Good." Yeah,
that was the same way.
We are an embarrassment on the world stage, and I refuse to cheer for any Canadian national team at any event.
Yeah, me too.
I will cheer for individuals, but I'm not going to cheer for any national team, because why would you be a public? It's kind of like the Iranian team, and I'm like, I get that you're standing against your nation, but dude, just ask for asylum. Just say you're not going to play for them.
Or just like if you were like Chinese, like, watching the Chinese national team or something like that, so internationally, I'd be like, no, I'm not trying to cheer for them.
Yeah,
because we basically,
you know what have actually been like a real statement for the Iranian team? What? Own goals. Just like, the match ended like 20-0. Why? Because the Iranians scored on themselves, because they would rather see Iran fall in disgrace than even play for them. And I'll be like, the statement that would send, it would be amazing. Like, they still lost all their games, but
that would still,
that would
still be a big statement. Yeah,
they still ended up making a fairly reasonable statement. Because it would be like, not only are we unwilling to say the anthem, but we are willing to publicly act against our country.
Yeah, and they should, because their country is like, seriously, and like, it doesn't take much to like see where Canada's at. Like, we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But Canada is such an embarrassing joke. Like, our prime minister, without any fear, basically like gave away that he's a dictator. Like, I was shocked by his own admission. So I was like, oh, okay, good. Good to know. But we're going to cover that in a little bit. But
talking about responses to dictators, let's talk about Elon Musk. So Elon Musk said he will create a new smartphone if Apple and Google delete or drop the Twitter app amid rightward lurch. Their rightward lurch is, of course, stupid, because it's not moving rightward. It's just saying right people are not going to be instantly deleted and censored like they have been in all big tech platforms. So new Twitter boss Elon Musk said he's not opposed to the idea of creating his own smartphone if Apple and Google remove their app, after sparking controversy earlier this week by promising general amnesty. My old account is still suspended. I'm waiting on you, Elon. Musk responded to right-wing podcaster Liz Wheeler's suggestion that he should create a new phone if the tech giants choose to boot Twitter from their app stores. Ms. Wheeler pointed out that the endeavor would not be a challenge for a man who built rockets to Mars, and claimed that half the country would happily ditch the bias snooping iPhone and Android and purchase what she called as the Telon phone.
That's pretty cool.
Musk is saying that he is contemplating the idea as a last resort. I actually didn't mind the Tim Pool name for his phone.
What's the phone?
Which would be the X phone. Because a lot of Elon Musk's stuff is X. So you have like the Model X, you have SpaceX, you have.
That's true.
He said that he's contemplating changing the name of Twitter to the X app.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a lot of things in his life are X's. So it's like, well, it wouldn't be that much of a stretch to make the X phone. I just want it to be under the brand name of the Boring Company. I'm like, will you buy a Boring Company phone? Yes, I will buy a Boring X phone.
I will make that happen.
I will make that happen. Just for kicks. Because it'd be amazing.
Well,
but,
and I mean, like,
yeah, go ahead.
Didn't it already try to do that with the Freedom phone? But we don't. I don't know how far that went.
Did he do that?
No, he didn't do that. But somebody else tried to do that with the Freedom phone.
Well, I know that there was. I remember a couple years ago, I watched this video about a modular phone, and I was like, "This is an amazing idea," because it was essentially like you buy kits, like you have the motherboard. And the motherboard has modular components, and you can essentially, like, the screen and everything will be the same, but you can, it's like, okay, well, if you want to buy a better camera, you don't buy a better phone, you just buy a better camera to mod onto that phone.
Oh, no. Check this out. So if you actually, go and Google Freedom phone, it actually does exist, and you can get it right now.
Okay. Well,
like, it is actually available. I'm like, oh yeah.
I remember hearing about this.
Yes.
Yeah, just $384.
Yep, uncancelable app store, preloaded apps.
Yeah.
Clear OS.
But Elon was essentially saying it's just like if Apple and Android delete Twitter from the App Store, and then if I sell the X phone or whatever it's called with Twitter automatically installed and you can't censor it and you can't do anything to it.
Yep.
Many, and I was like, yep.
Yep, I'll do that.
I'd buy an X phone. I'd do it.
Yep.
Just because, well, like right now, like they're like, oh, we're not spying on you. And you're like, we believe you.
Yeah. Yeah, like the problem is like the media, people don't realize how big this dragon is. The dragon that is completely and totally consuming everything is so massive that people don't realize how big its tentacles are. How like every single news outlet out there they're all puppets to the same basic sources that are all telling them what to say and what to do. Like it's all lockstep. It's incredible how little little freedom we have.
Yeah.
And I think that this next story really shows how the illusion of freedom that we have is under such an assault and is so tentatively hanging on by a thread.
Yeah.
That even like people who are as smart as some of the smartest minds, like medical minds on earth, didn't realize how bad it was.
Yeah.
Okay.
So from Summit.news, anti-lockdown Stanford professor, academic freedom is dead. They systematically make it seem as though everyone agreed with their ideas about COVID policy when in fact there was deep disagreement among scientists, which is true. So Stanford professor challenged the orthodoxy of lockdowns, has warned that academic freedom is dead and that all those who stood up to the regime now face a deeply hostile work environment. Jay Bhattacharya, the author of the Great Barrington Declaration, in which thousands of scientists called for a policy of herd immunity over lockdowns, warned that when you take a position that is at odds with the scientific clarity, your life becomes a living hell. Speaking at the Academic Freedom Conference in Stanford's Graduate School of Business, Bhattacharya, who recently described lockdowns as the most catastrophically harmful policy in all of history and the single worst public health mistake in the last 100 years, both very likely to be true, noted, "We have a high clarity that declares from on high what is true and what is not true." And then, of course, there's a bunch of tweets. And then he also notes the basic premise is that if you don't have a protection in academic freedom in the hard cases, when a faculty member has an idea that's unpopular among some of the other faculty, powerful faculty, or even the administration, if they don't protect it in that case, then you don't have academic freedom at all. And of course, him and many others, including ourselves, were initially vilified for damning lockdowns, but have since been vindicated as the societal and medical toll of the shutdowns has been revealed.
Yeah, but the important thing is that the consequences are still hitting them.
Yep.
Even though they've been vindicated by a lot of these, like, the science has come out. They faced nonstop damage and attacks on their reputation that is basically going to stick with them for life. And all the people who pushed it faced no repercussions, no downsides, no nothing. Okay, so this is why, when you hear people talk about climate change, okay, people ask me how can you prove that climate change doesn't work? I'm like, because I know the people in charge of these systems and the people that are pushing these things. That whole idea that every climate change scientist believes that this is all true. I'm like, give me a break.
Yeah.
I know how these organizations work and how they basically all they do is they make pronouncements by fiat. Everyone just kind of marches along. They're threatened if they don't comply. We don't have any sort of independent science anymore. It's just basically people with a lot of power who just suddenly decide we're going to do this, and the public's going to go along because they're experts. Now, one thing that may happen in the next couple of years, and people have been warning about this, is that there's been over 50, 60, 70 years worth of good faith that people have put into the medical profession. They believed everything that the medical profession has told them because they're trustworthy and all that kind of stuff. But because of everything that's happened with COVID, I genuinely believe a lot of people are going to be like, you know what, we can't trust them anymore. And I think a lot of people I've met don't trust doctors. They don't trust the medical industry. They don't trust any of these experts. And they're becoming so authoritarian now that I think if a real crisis, an actual devastating crisis comes, I think they're going to have a tough time. And that's totally their fault.
Oh, yeah. Totally the fault of the system and those who have perpetuated the lies because they were afraid of the consequences or because they benefited publicly from it.
Very much so.
Yeah. So, who is it? I think it was Michael Knowles. He's like, I am more likely to trust a witch doctor rather than Fauci.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Because that's how dishonest these people are. When Fauci resigned this past week, the end of last week, his final thing was and don't forget, we have to continue to wear masks to save people, and everybody make sure they get their 4th boosters because we have to prevent each other from passing on the virus. And it's are you freaking serious, man? Yeah. You are just a mouthpiece of lies, and you just want to run away because you're straight up evil. I hope that the Republican Congress just comes straight after your corrupt ass.
Yeah.
Come on, Rand Paul. Kick him. Kick him.
Yeah, this man is responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people. Both during the COVID crisis and in the AIDS crisis and epidemic, and in countries all over the world, where he did all sorts of experiments and all that kind of stuff.
He's also really nasty to beagles.
Yeah. That's the one that
I remember. That's the one that people remember because that's where the media started to be like, maybe Anthony Fauci isn't that great because he endorsed the torture and killing of beagles, and it's but you're not going to say anything about how he's abused and tortured and did terrible things to people by encouraging lockdowns that destroyed hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of lives. It's no, we're going to focus on the beagle thing, and it's I literally hate you.
Yeah, it's like when I told people, I'm like, by the way, did you know that if they would have encouraged early treatment using all available treatments, that if they have not told people to just go home and come back when you're deathly ill, if they had not pushed remdesivir, and if they had actually treated people and not sent them away, and had done away with the masking because the masking was actually only making people's immunity worse. Do you know that close to 85 to 95% of people would not have died?
Yeah.
Hence, he's responsible for about 80 to 95% of the deaths in the United States.
Ready? Say it with me. Ivermectin.
It's just like,
just drives us both crazy.
These people are like super villain level.
Yep.
Super villain.
Super villain level evil.
Yeah.
And they are not dissimilar from the Chinese government.
Yeah.
So China plans crackdown after COVID protests from the BBC. China's top security agency has called for a crackdown on hostile forces. So we heard that kind of terminology before. After rare protests against COVID rules. Well, they're rare because...
Give me a break. Come on.
Well, they're rare because the Chinese government does not let information about those protests get out, and they've killed so many protesters.
You have no problem killing protesters.
Yeah, police officers have flooded now empty protest sites, with some protesters saying police have contacted them to seek information on their whereabouts because they wish to arrest them and put them in concentration camps. Meanwhile, the country's health officials say lockdown should be imposed and eased quickly. China has recorded record numbers of new cases in recent days because, of course, zero COVID is not a valid technique. It's the only major economy with a zero COVID policy, with local authorities clamping down on even small outbreaks with mass testing, quarantines, and snap lockdowns. I actually saw a video of like the Chinese police enforcing forced testing, and they basically had people lining up to go into these tents, and they had police just patrolling with machine guns to make sure everybody got tested. It's like, yikes.
Make people a little more antsy.
Yeah. Over the weekend, thousands in China took to the streets demanding an end to the strict measures, with even some making rare calls for President Xi to stand down. But a heavy presence in police presence in China's major cities, including Beijing and Shanghai, seems to have curbed further protests on Monday and Tuesday. The ruling Communist Party's Central Political and Legal Affairs Commission, CCP, no, there's not any word that I can make out of that, which oversees domestic law enforcement across China, said it was necessary to crack down on infiltration and sabotage activities by hostile forces in accordance with the law. The statement, reported by Chinese news agency Xinhua, did not mention the recent demonstrations, which began after a fire in a high-rise block in Urumqi, Western China, killed 10 people on Thursday. Many Chinese believe COVID restrictions in the city contributed to the deaths, although the authorities deny this.
Of course they do.
Well, the reason that people blame the government for this is because this is what the Chinese government has been doing to enforce lockdowns if there's an outbreak in an apartment building or something like that. So this is an apartment building in Chengdu in China. The government is welding the entrance door to the apartment building to enforce the lockdowns. If you do not have enough food at home, you will starve. Of course, some people are committing suicide jumping out of the windows because they don't have enough food to last through the lockdowns. So let's just watch this. I have no words for how evil this is. Like, he's putting a bar over the door so that you cannot get out. And he's welding it like, nobody's going to have what's required to open that door inside of their apartment. You would need, like, to open that door, if he's welding it shut and if he does a decent job, you are going to need some level of explosives to open that door.
Not to mention that even if you manage to somehow open that door, you know, the Chinese government will send somebody else.
Oh, well, the Chinese government, like, I remember reading about what happened in that apartment building, and most of the people didn't get out because they were so afraid of what the government would do. That they were terrified of leaving their apartment because the Chinese government didn't authorize them to leave. Because the police came by, what they were saying is they came by once or twice a day, and they would say, all right, this is your, like, free period where you can go around you can have activity. You can have activity in the apartment building. You can have exercise, you can do whatever. And then when your time period is up, then you have to go back. And this is, of course, strictly enforced. And if you disobey, then you go to jail.
Because the Chinese government basically follows communist regime, communist, like, you know, tactics. Basically, you have to keep your populace at constant fear. They have to be scared at all times. Otherwise, they will overwhelm you. It's basically the Bug's Life strategy. Basically, the grasshoppers have to come in, scare the crap out of them, because they can't have them ever realizing that they outnumber them.
They outnumber them, and they could take them out, but it would take all of them.
And I look at some of those protests. I've seen videos of those protesters on the streets and all that, and clashing with police and all that. If you had the true numbers, the true number of the people who actually like live in that area, if you had hundreds of thousands of people clashing with police, the police would be completely unable to restrain the amount of people out there and the damage that they could do. The Chinese government knows this.
Yes.
So they have to put down these protests immediately, quickly, and with as little international embarrassment as possible. But they do. They have no qualms about putting protests down harshly, because they don't really care about what people. They care about their power. And the people are there purely for one reason, is to support their power. And funny enough, this is China. And we expect this from China, but this is exactly where our Canadian government wants to take us.
Wants to go.
Well,
there's a reason. Of course, we've said this multiple times. There is a reason that Trudeau stated that he admires China's basic dictatorship, because if he had this level of control, he would be as happy as a pig in mud.
Yeah.
So from the Daily Mail, Biden ordered Trudeau to end Freedom Convoy over fears the United States car plants would close within hours before the Canadian PM invoked the emergency powers to quash it. So Biden demanded PM Justin Trudeau stop the Freedom Convoy that protested the borders. And the finance minister, Chrystia Freeland, previously testified that Washington was very, very, very worried about the blockades. Trudeau, according to text between Clow and Freeland, talked to Biden about money, people, and political media support from America. 3 days after speaking with Biden, Trudeau invoked the Emergencies Act to clear out the protesters.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of foreign interference, this is a very serious, intrusion of American interests into the Canadian, affairs, right? This should really be concerning to a lot of people. When I heard about this, I was like, dang, the Americans are pretty much telling Justin Trudeau, jump, you just say how high. So both the Americans and the Canadian government were pretty much they had no interest whatsoever in changing policy at all.
Yeah. Well, of course, that's backed up by this article from the Post Millennial. Trudeau says protesting to demand policy change is worrisome.
Yeah.
Isn't that everything that protesting is about?
Well, listen to the actual quote. So if you scroll down a bit, there's a video. This is the quote that it actually made me realize, oh, I see what's going on here. He has a completely fundamentally broken view of what protesting is all about. He totally does. And this explains everything about this man.
Yeah.
He basically believes he is untouchable. Nobody's allowed to tell him what to do. You can tell him what you think, but he'll just ignore you. Yeah. So here's
some of their asks are non-starters, like overturning the results of the election that we just had. But in terms of responding to their demands or legitimizing them by engaging, I'm highlighting that I'm worried about setting a precedent that a blockade on Wellington Street can lead to changing public policy. People need to be heard, but we need to get that balance right. And then she agreed that I need to be cautious and I don't want to set any bad precedents.
Okay, so fairly self-explanatory. There's a willingness to discuss, but you were concerned about setting a precedent where a blockade could equal a change in public policy. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think we have a robust functioning democracy, and public protests are an important part of making sure we're getting messages out there, and Canadians are getting messages out there and highlighting how they feel about various issues. But using protests to demand changes to public policy is something that I think is worrisome.
Okay.
There.
Thank you, Mr.
Although, sorry, to a certain extent.
No, please go on.
Protests, if you're out protesting that the government is shutting down a safe injection site or something, you are asking for changes in public policy. But there is a difference between occupations and saying we're not going until this is changed in a way that is massively disruptive and potentially dangerous, versus just saying, yeah, we're protesting because we want public policy to change, and we're trying to convince people to get enough of them that politicians will listen to enough people saying, okay, I'm going to lose votes if I don't change this. That's the usual way protests can be effective in our democracies.
Okay, that's a fair point of distinction.
Out there. So I remember I watched Fever Fry talking about this. He actually watched this live.
Yeah, he did.
When Justin Trudeau said this, and he basically said, like, that's what every fascist dictator says. That protests are not should never be used to like change public policy. They basically believe that they are above the law and they are not accountable in any way to their people.
And what he was saying essentially, and by his actions, because compared to other there have been other so-and-so occupations where people kind of start protesting and they won't leave until policy change is met. I think back to the railroads. I think back to I think it was about eight or 9 months ago with the Wet'suwins, which that protest, like, if anyone should have been broken up by the authorities, it should have been that one. Because that one, there was actual threats of violence, and the intention was not to, it's like, okay, well, we're going to just like make our voices heard, but we're still going to allow, no. Their intention was to starve the place out. And eventually, if it came to it, was to like destroy the factory with the people inside and kill them. And Justin Trudeau didn't say anything about those ones because those are protests for things that Justin Trudeau supports. But it's simply because, well, this protest was against policies that he had enacted. Then he uses different terminology for them. And it's like, well, this protest is allowed because I support them, and this protest is not because they're protesting me. This is the actions of a tyrant.
He basically like tipped his hand right there and basically said, like, yeah, like, I don't like, I have made my decision, and it doesn't matter what you say or do. I will never change my mind on this decision. Doesn't matter what it is. Here's the major problem with the Freedom Convoy and the blockades. The major problem with the Freedom Convoy and the blockades is that they were too effective, and so they forced them to act. Because like we said, like we just showed, the Americans were feeling the heat. They were like, yeah, we're going to lose like car companies. Like plants are going to shut down. The economy was being heavily affected. The city of Ottawa was in...
There was massive trucker shortages.
Yes, exactly. And unfortunately, that wasn't enough for them. Like he was so like stubborn,
so adamant,
and big-headed
that it doesn't matter how much damage or how much, like what happens as a result of my policies will change when I say so.
Yeah.
It's not because my people are suffering. It's not because it's the best course of action. It's because I say so, because I am in charge and I am above the law, and nobody can say anything that is against me, or else I will take action which significantly harms them for the rest of their lives, potentially putting them in jail.
And anybody
maiming them.
And anybody who actually followed like the actual aftermath of how they broke up the protests, that was so freaking similar to what I've seen in like the Hong Kong protests, to like the Chinese like put down with the Cuban put downs of the protesters, where they went in and those police were just absolutely brutal. They literally dragged people out of their vehicles
and
beat them to like, you know, to
a pulp.
Like that's somehow justified. These are peaceful people who are surrendering, and you decided like, I'm going to take out all my aggression. Like, you know, like there's no accountability for these idiots. No cop should be getting away with that kind of stuff. So the next video, actually, just
skip to the video. I was going to do that because the video makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. So the video, so this is like from the commission. So there's like
this is from a couple days earlier.
So the commission wrapped up a couple days ago. This was the line that I thought was most telling from Chrystia Freeland. Now, actually, Stephen, can you go back maybe like 10 seconds? on this one because she makes a mention of something that I think is important.
I can go back 20 seconds.
Yeah, let's go with that.
Okay.
So
she's going to talk about Windsor.
Okay, just to give people a little bit of a little context, the lawyer here is giving her a couple questions, and she's trying to like give her like, well, what about this kind of protest? What about this kind of protest? And she's trying to like see like, okay, you're trying to say that this was totally justified, but isn't this like similar to like Occupy Wall Street, Occupy this? And then Chrystia Freeland basically tries to like claim that she heard somebody claim that like, you know, Canada's a banana republic. And she was like really hurt by that comment. But keep that in mind when she responds to like the real analogy. So you can play the video.
Occupied for a long time, and maybe some comparable public park in Windsor being occupied, and so on across the country. That would have been entirely legitimate protest, but that wasn't what was happening.
Okay, maybe I can take you to an example closer to home. For me, when Solidarity had a general strike in Poland and blocked the ports, Western democracies applauded that action. That was economic disruption, was viewed as a legitimate form of political protest at that time.
I'm going to allow myself one personal comment, which is I did make a bet with myself that you and I would end up talking about Solidarność.
Yeah, you know, coming from the Eastern Bloc, it was going to happen.
Yeah, I am aware of that. And I don't think you'll be surprised to think that I thought about that at the time. And more recently and more specifically, I thought about the Maidan in Ukraine. And when we took this action. And
can you pause for a second, team? Just really quick for in case anybody's listening on this. The Solidarity movement is referring to the Polish people blockaded ports and all sorts of like infrastructure to try to cripple the Soviet Union into basically complying with their demands to like, you know, to stop like, you know, like infringing and hitting them hard. The whole world supported them.
Yep.
But this was like a protest movement against like, you know, like an authoritarian regime. Her answer is interesting because of how she kind of dodges this one. I just want people to know the context.
Let me talk about a few differences. And the main one is this. Solidarność, as you know very well, was a protest against a government that was illegitimate. That was from whence it drew its power and legitimacy. This was people rising up against an authoritarian, and I would even say in the case of Poland, colonial regime.
Okay.
In Canada, what happened was a democratically elected government that was actually acting on policies that we had campaigned on just that summer. So it was a fresh democratic mandate. There was no lack of transparency with the people of Canada. And people who disagreed with those policies were holding the country's economy hostage.
Okay, Ms.
And
Spear,
that was not appropriate.
I do want to raise a concern. I'm assuming you're not saying that democracy only operates at the time of casting our ballot. Obviously, I think you acknowledge that we are able to protest in between those times. So even after you were democratically elected, people could protest your government's policies, correct?
100%. And I am in no way suggesting that the act of protest is anti-democratic. On the contrary, the right to protest, I think it's a feature, not a bug of democracy. But what I was saying, which I believe very strongly, is there is a big difference between acts of popular resistance and even revolution against an authoritarian regime and protest in a democracy.
And And Minister Freeland, I'd like to
Yeah,
just
stop
take
it
you.
there.
Yep.
So, like, listen to what she said. Like the amount of complete vapid out of touchness that she has. She was like, "Well, there's a big difference between popular protest against like an authoritarian regime and us, because we're not authoritarian in any way. We don't just kind of like shove things down your throat and be like, I don't care what you think, do it. You know, tell me you like it. Like the only difference is the only thing that she doesn't get is that every freaking single authoritarian government in history thought they were the good guys.
Yep.
Everyone.
They were a decent,
everyone.
good government.
The German the German Nationalist Socialist Workers' Party.
Yep.
They believed that they were the good guys. They never thought that they were the bad guys. The USSR, they believed that they were the good guys. Every one of these governments thought they were the good guys. The fact that she thinks like, well, we're the good guys, so protest against us, those can't be legitimate because we're the good guys. We're the benevolent, government, and nothing we say can be questioned and all that kind of stuff. And I love how she said the lady was saying are you saying that that democracy only functions like on election day, not in between? And she's like, no, I support protest 100%.
100%.
And then she goes on to disqualify all the different kinds of protests she doesn't support. I'm like, these people are freaking pathological liars.
Yeah.
We're run by a dystopian, these people are so evil and crooked.
Mm-hmm.
It is brutal. So we just had our prime minister basically tell you that, by the way, protests that are trying to
change public policy are bad.
Bad. Totally bad. Don't even think about it. Well, you could just have a protest. Let us know what you think so we can ignore you.
Yep.
So basically that's spoken like a dictator.
Mm-hmm.
That's what a dictator would say. It's like, you can protest all you like, but I'm not changing a thing. That's a dictator talking right there.
Yep.
And his number 2 in command basically said that, by the way, any protests against us are illegitimate because we're the good guys. We're wonderful. And there's a difference between legitimate protest and occupation. We're going to call you whatever we think you are. We try to discredit you.
Mm-hmm.
These people are just, man.
Yeah.
This is why I cannot agree more with that flag upside down, the thing that you constantly
allude to. Yep.
Our country will not be free until these murdering lunatics are out of power.
Not only out of power, but also facing significant justice for everything that, and not just, of course, the federal Liberal government, but also leaders and public health officials and everyone who is involved in the destruction and the segregation of millions of people across Canada should all face serious punishment. And it's unfortunate, but they're never going to get it. Yeah.
I think Trudeau reminds me a lot of Idi Amin or of Pinochet. Mm-hmm. These are guys who basically nothing. It was nothing they did could ever stick to them. Mm-hmm. Trudeau has more scandals and more complete embarrassments under his reign than anybody else you can imagine. Yeah. You think Trump is he's got so many, no. Trump is nothing. Trump has got nothing on Trudeau. If Trudeau was on the right, he would have been eviscerated,
excoriated, and the media would be calling for him to be overthrown, if not outright assassinated.
Yeah. People would probably be calling for assassination, period. Mm-hmm. Trudeau, the blackface, incident, that was responsible for.
Well, of course, that was before, but yeah. The Aga Khan scandal was outright corruption.
The SNC
Lavalin scandal was basically just saying, I like this company, I like these guys, they're friends, so let's have the RCMP and the Justice Department look the other way on serious and open crimes. You have the We Charity scandal, where basically the charity was funneling money to him and his family. Like the list goes on and on and on.
Embarrassing like Canada with India.
Oh yeah, India and China.
And China.
Yeah,
because of the
of course embarrassing with his tribute to Fidel.
Yep, Fidel is his father, so to speak. Wink, wink. But like, the crazy thing about Trudeau is he just can't be beat. Actually, I know who he reminds me of. Now that I actually I think I've
Take a moment. Yep.
Okay. Do you know who Coney is? K-O-N-Y?
Coney 2012. Yep.
Yeah, you know who he is, right?
The Libyan guy.
Yeah. No. That's he was.
That was
Uganda.
Oh, okay. Who is the guy in Libya?
You're thinking of Muammar.
Oh, Gaddafi. Yeah.
Okay.
Gaddafi.
So anybody who doesn't know, Joseph Kony, he was notorious in Uganda because he basically created an entire army of like child soldiers. So he basically abducted children. He got all the abducted little girls and to be basically sex slaves, and all the abducted boys to basically be soldiers in his army. And the thing is, I remember I saw a documentary on him a couple years ago, and it was really good. Basically, what happened was this man was getting all sorts of incredible help from demonic forces. Like this, like in a Christian documentary. It's called The Unconventional War. I recommend you go on YouTube and look it up. This guy was getting all sorts of assistance, and nothing that anybody could try could hurt him. He basically even when the government had far more military power than he ever could. But somehow they could never trap him. They could never overwhelm him. They could never really pinpoint him. He was just always out of their grasp. And it wasn't until like a bunch of Christian pastors got together and actually like prayed and tore down all of his like connections to this occult, that all of his power disappeared, and suddenly he just disappeared from relevance. He suddenly became a non-issue anymore. I feel like this is what Trudeau is like right now. I feel like there's something otherworldly going on with this man, where he has some sort of protection from all sorts of places that basically make him invulnerable.
Yep.
Because it is unbelievable how much this man has been hit with a million kind of scandals that would annihilate any politician in any reasonable society, but he is completely unfazed by any of them. It blows my mind. And all I can think of is that there is some sort of like help that he's getting.
Yeah.
Because there's no way this man should be in any position of power of any kind, much less running our country.
Yep.
I really don't believe that. Yeah.
Yep. No. We'll go over the last story, the last article.
Oh, you want to cover this one?
Oh, yeah, because we can talk about an opinion column from John Iveson about Chrystia Freeland and Trudeau and their justification for using the Emergencies Act. So, from John Iveson, Freeland's feared from the convoy weren't out of line, but the response still was. That's why we have the police, and evidence suggests they were ready finally to do their job even before the government's judicious intervention. So, Freeland offered a convincing depiction of the impasse in which the government found itself. She was less persuasive in making the case for the measures the Liberals introduced in a frenzy to break the deadlock. The finance minister, in testimony, said that until the second weekend of the protest in early February, she had almost entirely focused on the federal budget that was due that spring, but as the protest turned into occupation, she said she started hearing from business leaders that the spread of dissent was becoming a cause for concern. Department of Finance officials were asked to provide options that were not already being used. The request produced the measures that were later taken under the Emergencies Act, including giving FinTrack, the government's financial activities monitoring agency, the authority to track crowdfunding and payment processing platforms, enabling cabinet to issue binding direction to banks to freeze the accounts of individuals or entities suspected in being involved in the protests. We came to the conclusion that everything was being utilized. The FinTrack monitoring authorities were appropriate for a 20th century economy, but not for a 21st century economy. Like, what she's essentially saying there is just like, well, Like, we thought everything was appropriate, but we didn't think it went far enough.
Yeah.
Like, because of how, like, everything that Trudeau and Freeland were saying was like, well, we didn't deem them appropriate. And so, because they were not a legitimate protest, because they were an occupation, because they were threats, because they were economically endangering Canada, then no action was far enough.
Yep.
It's like, well, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
You have to take action that, like, if you wanted to take action with the convoy, then the Ottawa police should have actually gone through with their meeting with convoy leadership. What happened? Ottawa police met with people that weren't involved in the organization or of leadership of the convoy. And then they're like, well, we came to an impasse. It's like, well, yeah, because they didn't actually have any authority of the convoy, because you refused outright to meet with the leadership of the convoy, and you outright called them occupiers and terrorists.
Yep.
It's like, well, they're not going to talk with you, just like they didn't talk to the media.
Yep.
They had a special session to deal with independent media, because they wouldn't deal with the establishment and the mainstream media, because the mainstream media will lie and twist their words. Just like how the federal government will lie and manipulate to twist and try and push for their agenda, even when it's not beneficial for everyone.
Yeah.
Like, if the government had actually been reasonable, it's like, well, like, we see what our policies are doing and how much this is harming Canada, and it's what we're doing is harming Canada far more severely than what the protesters are doing, because the protesters, yes, they're blockading the bridge, yes, they're blockading the Coutts border, but they're still allowing a lane to get through. It's not permanently halting trade and transport, it's just slowing it down.
Yeah, it's like really crippling it.
It's really crippling it, but it's not blocking it off entirely.
Yep.
And their response is like, well, let's shut it down forcibly. Let's basically arrest anybody who is involved with it, and let's make sure that they are in fear so that they will never do this again.
Yeah. By the way, the government basically put themselves in this predicament.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's think hypothetically. Let's imagine there was a reasonable government, not an authoritarian dictator like Trudeau and Freeland at the helm, but a reasonable government that actually thought things through rationally.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you get a massive influx of people all coming to the nation's capital. You get lots of warning. You're like, okay, there's a and you can see all across Canada that there's like a lot of like groundswell support.
Yeah,
this is not
support.
This is not a small
fringe
thing.
minority.
Yeah, a fringe minority. Give me a break. Anyways, so you actually like go and meet with them and be like, okay, this is going to be a huge disruption. Maybe let's talk about this and talk about what can and can't be done.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But no, the government decided like, nope, right from the get-go, we're not talking to you.
We're not talking with them.
Not at all.
And not only are we not going to talk to them, we are going to arrest and ticket people who are like walking in Ottawa with jerry cans.
Yeah.
We are going to freeze the bank accounts of not just the convoy organizers. We're going to freeze the bank accounts of anybody who donated in support of the Freedom Convoy.
Well, by the way,
everything. Yes.
You know that like the they were able to do that because somebody hacked into the donations thing. Remember?
Yeah.
Remember how like somebody illegally hacked into it, and Canada and the Canadian officials like, oh,
we're gonna look the other way.
We're just gonna
how we got this information.
Stolen, very like illegitimately sought information. We're just gonna jump on this and just pretend like we didn't know about the hacking and all that.
We're just gonna ignore that because it suits our ends.
Right. But yeah, like the problem is that they decided we're just going to pretend and ignore this until it goes away. Well, it wasn't going away, and it was way too effective. Mm-hmm. That's the thing. One thing you got to hand it to the truckers. Their protest was so effective that the government could not ignore it.
Yeah.
That's how effective it was. And so what happens when a protest is too effective in an authoritarian regime? Well, in China, they send the police to pretty much crack down,
arrest,
force.
And find out anybody who is involved in it and make sure that they pay a heavy price.
Right.
And what do we do in Canada? We do essentially the same thing, but we do it and we try and pretend it's under the guise of protecting freedom and democracy and protecting those who have been like every time I talk to someone about the convoy, it's just like, well, we have to think about those that were affected in Ottawa. And I'm like, by honking? They're like, it was causing a massive strain and disruption in their lives, and they didn't get any sleep. And I'm like, but the honking stopped it overnight. And they're like, no.
Once they had that injunction, it stopped.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even though that injunction was stupid, but
yeah,
stopped, because like the whole idea is to be disruptive so that they just couldn't just ignore them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like imagine like somebody took over downtown Calgary with like tons of trucks.
Yep.
I'm sorry, but I'm not going to be like horribly inconvenienced by that.
No.
And if they're going to be like, and they're saying that this is like a national Canada-wide emergency for a localized emergency that just only took place in Ottawa.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You're telling me that was a national crisis?
Well, and of course, if we remember, like in the aftermath of the Freedom Convoy, the crackdown on the protests here were far more intense.
Yeah.
Like I remember there was somebody who got pulled over at the Freedom March here in Calgary, and he got pulled over for what? For honking in support of the freedom protest. And so he got pulled over for that because I believe the ticket that was shown was public endangerment. It's like, wow, this is the level. And of course, like on Canada Day in Ottawa, police were scanning people with a metal detector. They weren't allowing anyone even within like 500 meters of Parliament Hill who had an upside down flag. It was only people who were supportive of the Trudeau regime.
Yeah.
This is the government that is presiding over us. This is why we have no trust. This is why we have no faith. And this is why we will continue to have the flag upside down, because we are a nation in distress, and we will continue to be. And that is why I am glad that we are out of the World Cup.
Yeah. And this is like why, like Christian Freeland's like, commented like, that was an illegitimate government. I'm like, I'm sorry, but like your government, as much as you were the, the chosen elected,
democratically elected.
Our entire parliamentary
system is a scam.
It's so completely broken that the Ontario and Quebec basically decide for all of Canada.
Yep. It's over before we even start counting our votes.
We have no say. We have absolutely no influence whatsoever in what happens in Ottawa. It is such a broken system. And unfortunately, they didn't even get the popular vote.
No.
I mean, I hate that Americans use that all the time, but that actually makes me realize that the vast majority of the people in Canada did not elect you.
Yeah.
Like what was I actually did the math one day. 12.5%.
Yep.
That is the number of Canadians who chose the Trudeau government, which is one of the reasons I actually get so angry when he says, this is what Canadians want. I'm like, give me a freaking break.
You have no
12% of Canadians chose you. 85% of Canadians did not give you any support. Don't give me a talking point about how every Canadian in Canada wants you to be leader. I'm like, give me a break. No. Every single thing this government has done has been about gaining power. Even during COVID, you remember when during COVID, they wanted to pass a legislation that would give them complete unmitigated power to choose whatever, to spend however they wanted.
Yeah.
And all the other parties were like, no way, that's not going to happen at all. And it was but it was kind of a blip. But everyone knew that was a power grab.
Yeah.
They were like, "Oh, good, there's a crisis. Let's use this to get more power."
Exactly.
This has been this government's MO since their beginning. Why did the Trudeau government trigger an election during when Aaron O'Toole was running?
Yeah.
Because they believe that they're going to get a majority.
Yeah.
Because
Aaron O'Toole was weak.
Yeah.
And he was.
Yeah, he was. But he miscalculated, and turned out that he actually didn't get that. Got a minority. So that wasn't enough. So what did he do? He sells out, and he gets the unholy alliance between him and the NDP.
Yeah.
So that he can get
that he can never be so that there won't be any votes of no confidence against him.
Yeah. This
and he
man
can pass
is
whatever he wants as long as he throws a couple bones to the NDP.
this man is an absolute like sickness on our country.
That's why I'm so like for end of the year, we're probably going to do a show for our end of the year sequences. We're going to do a show one of the day, hopefully between Christmas and New Year's. It just depends how our schedules go. But Justin Trudeau is probably number one in the running for douche of the year.
Oh, easily.
Yep. So we'll see how it goes. It might just be him. We might just have a long ranty episode about him because it will go on forever. But this is where we need to end today's show because we're over 2 hours now. Okay.
I will say Zelensky might actually be a contender too.
Yeah, he might be. World War III pusher right there.
That's right. Well, we're pretty pusher.
All right. So that's what we're going to end today's show. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you've been watching on our video platforms, such as BitChute, YouTube, Rumble, and we're not really on YouTube anymore because nobody notices because our videos don't get any views. For some reason, we don't know what's wrong with the YouTube algorithm, but something is going on.
Yeah, it went downhill really quick.
So I'm going to take that off. And unless we hear from like people on YouTube and other platforms, we're not putting our stuff on there anymore. I like it as a platform. I really do. But I just can't. I cannot. I can't justify it. It doesn't make any sense.
Why bother? Yeah, something weird. It's like, we're basically getting 0 views on
zero views for the last month. Everything else before then was 50 views, 30 views, 40 views. If it's that, I can totally justify putting videos on YouTube. It's a good platform. It's a good system. But if the algorithm is messed up and you don't get any views, you don't get any views. It's just the way it is. That being said, if you're following us on our text platforms, such as Facebook, Parler, Gitter, and Twitter, then you know how to operate those platforms if you're on those platforms. At least you should. If not, ask somebody or maybe get like a Using Twitter for Dummies book. It probably won't be that long. All right. So, with that in mind, we'd like to remind you at the Shrewd Dudes podcast, why be rude when you can be shrewd? We shall see you on Thursday for a regularly scheduled Thursday live stream, which of course will be at 8 o'clock Mountain Time. Until then, have a great couple nights, and as always, God bless.